husband, father, adventurer, entrepreneur, and leader in a few nonprofit organizations. He spends his time adventuring with his family, traveling the world via BMW motorcycles. He's the co-owner of Go Bring Go. Go Bring Go works with $25 to $250 million privately held B2B companies whose owners are in their 50s and 60s and are looking to make a successful leadership transition in the next decade or so. His team manages and coordinates the entire marketing and lead generation strategies while collaborating with your sales department and overseeing detailed execution. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Brandon Dempsey.
I think I'll be okay without the mic, unless you think I need it. Is anybody back there? Do you think I need it? You can hear? Okay, all right.
Turn it down.
I'm one of 14 kids. I have 13 younger siblings, and he who speaks the loudest and eats the fastest generally gets. So I had a lot of practice. Excited to be here with you today. I know I've got about 20-25 minutes, I think, right, to make an impact here. So we'll see how good of a job I do today, and hopefully I can earn applause at the end of it. So I'm a St. Louis kid. I went to school. So to answer the St. Louis question, DeSmet is a DeSmet boy, proud alum. And then I'm still here locally. And out of college, I was coming and decided I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always knew there was something I wanted to own my own business. I just didn't know what it was going to be. So stumbled in, created a business out of college. And I remember going into my first kind of big sales opportunity I was going to have. I walked in, it was an enterprise bank. I don't know if we have anybody here from Enterprise Bank or not. But walked in, the CEO was a guy named Kevin Eichner. And I walk in, and I'm dressed, I had gone to Macy's, and I bought this suit that has shoulder pads like up to here, right? And so I'm like, pleat pants, I'm walking in, I'm trying to look older than I am. I'm like 22 years old trying to sell this first company. And Kevin Eichner says, Brandon, you have no idea what the heck you're even selling. So I'll give you 30 minutes, you can give me a pitch, and I won't buy from you. Or, I'll clear up my calendar and we can talk for 2 hours. And I like to think that was one of the smarter things that I did. Is I said, all right, I won't sell you, try and sell you, give me 2 hours. Called the secretary and said, hey, do you mind just clear up the calendar? Give me 2 hours, this young man. Well, Kevin Eichner sat down and he asked me, he said, tell me what's going on, how's this business thing going? I said, oh, it's going great, I'm trying out, he goes, cut the bull, just tell me really. Struggle, I'm trying to figure out, here are all the things I'm trying to do. And Kevin said, well, Brandon, you're so focused on what you want to achieve. What I don't hear is who you want to be. You're so focused on this what you want to do, what you want to have, what kind of business owner you want to be, what you want to achieve, kind of house. But what I don't hear is who you want to be as a person. And that kind of hit me, it took me back. So I started thinking, reflecting that all the time growing up, people would ask me, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to do, right? There's always just what. I want to be an entrepreneur, or I want to do this, I want to do that, right? And there was never any focus on who do you want to be. And so Kevin challenged me, he said, hey, Brent, I want you to think about, take 5 people, and real or fake, they give you movie characters, you can choose your James Bond, that's who you choose. And take these 5 people, and write down the characteristics of these 5 people that you most admire. And then I want you to start thinking about how could you start orienting on a daily basis to start to be more like these characteristics. So I did that. I took it down, I wrote down my names, and I kind of drew a spider web and wrote down the people that I admired. And some of the things that came out were things about people being super fit, super healthy, people having an amazing relationship with their wife and with their kids, being esteemed and smart in business. And I started writing down all these things, and then all of a sudden it dawned on me that what I was writing down was a map for what I needed to focus on for who I wanted to become as a person. So coming out of school, I mentioned that I had 14 siblings. What I didn't tell you is at 16, I also moved out on my own. Became emancipated on my own, paid for DeSmet, halfway through my sophomore year, both junior year and senior year. Totally 100% on my own. So to come out and be on my own at a young age was, I was very independent. You weren't going to tell me what to do. I had no rules since the age of 16. And I wanted to be able to still build a life that was going to create that freedom and that opportunity. Well, I can tell you today, well, not during COVID, but my wife and I, last year, we traveled with our daughter. We did Ireland, we did Europe, we did another trip to Europe, travel lunch. But I took 11 weeks of travel. I was rappelling down canyons in Bogota, Colombia. I went scuba diving in the Philippines. That's something I always wanted to do. We took 11 weeks of travel and just had a blast doing it. And that life, the life that I'm fortunate enough to live today, I think was dating back to this Kevin Eichner talking about, hey, how are you going to focus on who you want to be, not what you want to do. And so, as I've done more and more speaking, talking about this focus on who, not what. The second thing I've learned is that from a goals standpoint, I'm a very goals-oriented person. So give me a goal, and I'll find a way to achieve it. Like, just give me the target, and I'll find a way to hit it no matter what. Because I'm like, that's just how my brain works, just look at goals. And I was doing research on a bunch of different goal planning, and I came across this article that talked about the reticular activation system in our brains. And I don't know how many of you know about this, but in your brain there is there's a thing in your brain called the reticular activation system. And the reticular activation system is what in your brain is the filter for your unconscious thoughts to your conscious thoughts. Okay? It's the filter that says, here's what I'm going to let pass through from unconscious to conscious. So right now I'm taking in all this data. I'm looking in your eyes, I'm seeing people move in the back, well, I can't see your faces, there's lights back there, I see some cars parked out there, right? But my brain's deciding what's going to let come into my conscious thought and what's going to keep out of my conscious thought. It's a reticular activation system that's doing that. Well, have you ever, Melissa, you just bought a new car, right? You just bought a new car. So before you bought that new car, how many of that new car did you see on the road?
Before?
Before.
Like 2, now I see them
2.
all the time.
Now I see them
All the time.
all
It's
the time. It's annoying. That's the reticular activation system. It's amazing. It's why if a Porsche 911 drives in that parking lot right now, I will see it. I guarantee you I will see it because I someday want to have a Porsche 911 Turbo. That's the kind of car I'd like to have. So if it drives by, I guarantee you I'll see it. But every other car that drives by, I won't notice it. Because our brain is actually wired to like if we tell it what we want, which you have, or something that we like, our brain says, hey, I'm going to pop up this opportunity, I'm going to show it to you. It's why when we decide we want a certain kind of car, we see that car everywhere on the road. Now, the fact is, Melissa, that car was on the road all the time before, right? But our brain it didn't pop it into our conscious thought. So what I've learned about goal planning is that when we get clear and, hey, this is something that I want, that suddenly then we get our brain clarity on, okay, I'm going to start popping up opportunities to make this happen for you, okay? And so what I designed was a little card, a little trick that I want to show you. So in the middle of the table, you'll see some little postcards. If you'll just grab one of those, there should be 4 per table. And set that card down. Hopefully you have pens. If you don't have pens, I can't tell you to borrow one from your neighbor. There's some clean pens out there, I guess we can grab if you need a pen. Yeah, if you don't mind, you grab a clean pen. Thank you. So this reticular activation system, I started doing a little bit more reading into it. And what I learned is that this reticular activation system is also what controls our dreams. It's what controls when we're sleeping, like why we have different dreams, what comes through. And it's this amazingly powerful system in our brain. And I will tell you that for me, when I was trying to do some goal planning, I'd write down goals, I'd write down goals, I'd write down goals. But my brain was always like, okay, well, I'd see different things, like I'd see that car, but I never saw the path of how I was going to be able to really get there. And so what I want you to think about is what are some of the things you'd like to achieve and or do and or be. So for me, when I do this, I do an exercise. I actually do this exercise at the end of every year. And some of the things that I write down are amazing husband, amazing father, successful entrepreneur, financially independent. But then I also write down stuff like Audi A7, which is what I drove today. I write down different motorcycles that I own. Or want to own, or different stuff, like different things, tangible things I want to have or achieve. A few years ago, I wrote down a new home, and now we're actually under construction on a new home in Webster now. So, I want you to think about what are some things you'd like to achieve, and or person you want to become, things you'd like to experience, and I want you to write those down outside the box. So you'll see there's a little box in there, a little rectangle. I want you to write down some of these things. Just write down 3 or 4 outside the box, if you will. Of what you want. Yeah. Tangible things are going to be easier than intangible things. Write down 3 or 4. You are not sharing this with anybody. No one's going to see this. This is yours to keep. If you feel to share it with a spouse, you're welcome to. So now you've written down, or should write down 3 or 4 things. Think about some tangible items you like to own. Think about who you want to be. Some clarity in there. All right, now what I want you to think about is I want you to take, inside that box, I want you to draw a line down the center of it. And on the left-hand side, inside the box, on the left-hand side, I want you to write the word time. And on the right-hand side, I want you to just draw a dollar sign. Now, what I've learned is that we can have anything in life we want to have if we're willing to put the time and or the money and resources toward working at it, if we really, really want it, right? If we want it bad enough, my wife, I did this exercise with my wife literally probably 12 years ago, and my wife wrote down at the time BMW 535 Xi and special wheels. And I'm like, at the time, I was like, holy cow, you know like how much that car cost, Branch? It was brand new. Told me I could write down anything I wanted, right? Like, okay, we make me my words. Excellent, thank you. And so she wrote it down. She wrote down this BMW 535 Xi. It's the dream car that she wanted at the time. And said, okay, we'll do this exercise. And then we wrote down time or money, and I said, okay, what's that new car cost? And she goes, I don't know. I said, well, go look it up. It's probably like a $50,000 car. And she comes back, she's like, no, it's a $70,000 car. I'm like, oh, even worse. Excellent, thank you. So I said, okay, well, how much would we have to save each week in order to buy that car, right? Like, what would it take to be able to save to buy that car? And we figured out how much money we were going to have to save each week to be able to buy that car. And we wrote it down under that money side. And, hey, we can set aside this much to buy that car. And it's going to take us 5 years to get there. But if that's what you really want, we'll set aside this much money and we'll buy that car in 5 years. Now, 3 years into this setting aside this money to buy this car, I'm doing a speaking engagement actually like this. And there was somebody in the room from Auto House BMW. Now, the amazing thing about reticular activation is that when not only is it that opportunities pop up into my mind, but when I share them with other people and I share what I'm after or dreams or goals or things that I want to have, suddenly I start to tap into your reticular activation. So I'm telling the story about the car. And this salesman from Auto House BMW says, Brandon, that's not a $70,000 car. I said, no, it is because she wants it new. And this guy goes, well, I have a new one on our lot for about 50, it's like 52 grand, 53 grand or something like that. And he said and at the time, I don't know, I can't remember the exact year that it was, but it was a late, it'd be like a 2019 right now. And he goes, I got on a lot for like 52, 53 grand right now. I'm like, seriously? Like, but it's gotta have the special wheels. Like she wrote it down, it's gotta have this airplane blade, wheels and whatnot. He's like, just take my car, I'll call you later. Sure enough, there it was on the lot. And the amount of money that we had saved equaled, by that point in time, that car. And so then suddenly my wife gets that car 2 years earlier than we had originally planned with saving up for it. And I was just blown away. I'm like, here's this exercise like in play right now, working before our eyes. So what I want you to do is look at those 4 things you wrote down. And what is something you would have to do weekly? This has got to be weekly in your control, from time or money that can be in your control to accomplish 1 or 2 of those things that you've written on the outside. It could be setting aside a little bit of money, it could be setting aside time. I tell you, when I write down, be an amazing husband, I will write down at the time, read articles and read articles weekly, read 2 to 3 books a year, and then I write down, talk to other men I respect as far as about what it means to be a good husband. And so I set aside time now to talking to other men that I admire, that are great husbands. And I've actually taken that to starting to interview different people and track them. Now I have the great fortune of interviewing it's like 15 to 16 different billionaires who are amazing husbands. They're still married they're still married. They have amazing relationships with their kids. They are healthy and fit, and they have a very successful and thriving business. And so now I've taken this concept of like, hey, let's go talk to other people and set aside time to do it and start learning from those people. So write down 1 or 2 things in the time or the money section, something you can control. You get 30 seconds to do that. So here's how this works. So it's amazing how I built this exercise, and then there was a psychotherapist on the other right who was in a room I was speaking to, and he said, Brandon, the exercise you just outlined is an exercise that's been used in psychotherapy for a long time. He said, because what you've done now is you've talked about all the things that I can control. Like the things that you've written on the outside are things you can't directly get. Like you can't just snap your fingers and say, I am that, or I want that, or I own that, or I get it today. but it's stuff that you want to achieve, stuff you want to do. It's the stuff inside the box that's in your control brain. And so you have the ability to set with time and control, time and money. Those are two levers that you can control. You can choose how you spend your money, you can choose how you spend your time. And so if you can align your time, your money, your resources that you have, and get them focused and spending time to achieve the things you want, then all that other stuff is going to come into fruition. But there's another part of this trick that was amazing to me in how it works. And that's if you flip your card over, you're going to see two lines down the middle. What I want you to write on the far left is, on the far left, let's do it backwards. The far left, I want you to write 1 year at the top. And then in the middle column, left-hand column, 1 year. Middle column, I want you to write 3 year. And in the right column, I want you to write someday. So it should say 1 year, 3 year, someday. Now, what we do is we take the goals and stuff we wrote on the other side, and we rewrite those goals and stuff on this side, and we put it in one of these columns. We put it in the 1 year column, the 3 year column, or the someday column. So go ahead and grab one thing and just add it. You can do the rest later, because I don't want to take up too much of your time. But just write one or two things on the back, in the 1 year column, the 3 year column, or the someday column. So if you were to come over to my house, in my desk, if you were to open my desk drawer, you would see an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper with this same exercise, folded in thirds, and you'd see things that would be written in the 1 year column, the 3 year column, and the someday column. And the someday column is about this long of things that I want to achieve, or I want to experience, I want to do. Like one of those things was scuba dive in the Philippines. One of those things was hike the Great Wall of China, both of which I ticked off last year. One of them was hike in the jungle of South America, ticked that off last year. So you'd see a whole lot of things in the someday column. Then you'd see a few things in the 3 year column. One of the things that's been in the 3 year column for a while is new house. We will move into our new house this December or January, but it's been sitting in the 3 year column. And then you would see in the 1 year column just a very few things that I want to accomplish, things that I want to do in the 1 year column. And what I do at the end of every year is I take something from the someday column and I move it over into the 3 year column. And then I take something from the 3 year column and I move it over into the 1 year column. And what has been amazing about this exercise for me at the end of every year is suddenly my brain gets focused on, hey, this is now moved from someday to 3 years. So we got to start putting some things in line in order to make this happen. Which is like when we wrote down we wanted to have kids sometime in the next 3 years. Like a bunch of things started changing, right? And then we moved from the 3 year column into the 1 year column. Suddenly now that particular activation system is on hyperdrive to figure out, okay, how are we going to start to accomplish that, right? So there's an old quote that a dream, or a goal without a date is just a dream. A goal without a date is just a dream, which means a dream with a date is simply a goal, right? A dream with a date is simply a goal. And so what I've found is that from a date standpoint, if we think about the someday, 3 year, and 1 year column, and if we can take the time to say, hey, these are things that I want to achieve, and I'm going to get clarity of purpose and clarity of this is what I want. And then we move it over into the 3 year column. Okay, I now have a lot of clarity. Then move over to the 1 year column. Now I'm hyper-focused. Okay, what do I have to do in order to make this thing a reality? And what I've found is that people that I have talked with them from our team, from our employees, from a marketing company, from a real estate company, or a construction company, is that when people get burned out or they're upset, it's because they aren't achieving, they aren't getting things out of life that they want. But when you take someone and they start feeling like they're accomplishing things and they're getting what they want, they get excited about it. And when people are excited about life and they're getting what they want, they work harder. And then when they're working harder, they get more of what they want, and it becomes this nice little cycle, right? It becomes this nice little reward of, hey, I'm achieving the things that I set out to achieve. I get pumped up and energized by that. It makes me go and work harder, and thus I'm now achieving more of what I want to achieve, and it's this nice virtuous cycle, right? And for me, that's called being impassioned. So I'm doing what I love to do. I'm getting rewarded by doing what I love to do. And the more I get rewarded, the more I want to do what I want to do. And it's the people that, what I find that we talk to that are like upset or depressed, it's because like, well, I want all these things in life, but I'm not achieving it. I'm not getting it. And when we talk about where their priorities are, first of all, they don't have clarity on what it is that they actually want to achieve or who they want to be. First, we've got to have that clarity. And second, we've got to get clarity on time and money to say, okay, how are we going to allocate the resources that we have and just get focused on accomplishing those? Because if we focus on accomplishing those, that's what brings it into fruition. Now, the amazing part of the exercise that I just did with you is how many of you in this room are married? Raise your hand if you're married. Okay, almost the entire room is married. So, when I did this exercise with my wife, she wrote some things on there, like a BMW 535 XI, that this may shock some of you, I had no idea she wanted some of those things, right? Like, I had no clue. I was totally aloof, typical husband, totally aloof. And suddenly we had this conversation, and I even wrote some things on there that she's like, really? You want to do that? Like, one of my goals is to run out the back of an airplane someday with a parachute on. Like, I just want to try it. I want the hatch to go down, and I want to be full sprint out the back of the airplane. Why? I don't know. But I just want to try it. I've seen movies, it looks cool. I just want to run out. So, that's my tech profile. So, but that's one of the things that I want to achieve. And so, when we did this exercise together, what it has done for our marriage, I'll tell you, for our relationship, is suddenly it gets us on the same page. Okay, what are we working toward and what are we trying to achieve? And so when we started, we wrote a new house. And so it had a new house. Then we wrote it on a 3-year. And we sat down, we took one of those big post-it sticks of paper you got to do whiteboard brainstorming sessions on. And we wrote on that paper every single thing we wanted in a new house. If you were to come to my house today, you would see this sheet of paper on the wall in our kitchen. It's a gigantic sheet of paper with everything we want. 3-car plus garage. Actually, I wrote down 4-car plus garage, and I scratched it off. I'm like, no, I really just need to be modest. I only need 3. Our new house is a 5-car garage, just so we're clear. I'm very excited. And we wrote down every single thing that we wanted in this house. We went back up the woods. We wanted to have, I wanted to have a deep basement, 10-foot deep basement. I wanted to have a detached 3-car garage in it. Ideally, a detached garage, 2-car, there's 2-car on there, or 1 car on the house. And so we wrote down everything. And our new house that we're building is literally everything except for one thing, and that's it doesn't back to woods. And that's because we're building in Webster Grove. And there are not many homes that back to woods in Webster Grove. My wife didn't want to move outside of 270, so she was willing to compromise on that. But literally, if you look at that list, we had guests over for dinner last night. Some neighbors came over for dinner last night, and they walked through our house. I'm like, what is with the sheet of paper with this? I'm like, that's our goals. That's what we want, and that's the house we're building. And they're like, how long has it been here? I said, this sheet of paper has been up here for 3 years, and it will stay up here until we move to our new house. And that clarity and that focus for our relationship has allowed us to stay focused on, okay, how do we make this happen? And when I look at reticular activation, so coming back to the house property, when we decided we wanted to buy a house, we started looking. We talked to all these realtors. We were talking to all these people. Then someone said, hey, you should try buying or building. I'm like, I don't know that we can afford to build. And so we started talking to other people. I'm like, well, I'll talk to some builders. I talked to some builders, and I went toward home with one of the builders, a guy named Bob Wilmering. And I'm like, what do you want for this house? He tells me, I'm like, look, we can't. That's out of our budget. We're not going to be able to build. He said, okay. Well, then we're leaving that house. We walk down the street, and there's this for sale sign on this lot. So I call and ask them how much they want for it. They tell me a price. I'm like, okay, that's still too high. But I go back to Bob and I can say, hey, if we were wanting to build this house that you have built that we really like, but we supplied the lot, how much would it cost to build the house? He gave us the number, and I said, well, if we can get this lot for that cheap, which was $100,000 less than they were asking for it, we could build a house. And shockingly, that's where we're building our house right now on Webster Road. And it has come from getting that clarity and then putting those goals out there of what you want to achieve and allowing your mind to tap into particular activation and allowing other people's minds to tap into particular activation to help you achieve what it is that you're after. So the goals, a dream with a date is just a goal. And the only thing stopping you is the allocation of resources of time and money and clarity and purpose of what it is you want to achieve. So that's what I have for you today. I appreciate the free lunch today. Thank you for that. And I hope you guys have a great week.